welcome back.
Welcome back to a very spooky sequel.
Yeah, we're doing a part 2 of Ruthie Mae McCoy. I realized that we didn't really address Ella's absence in last one, but then some people were asking, how are we proceeding with the show? And Josh is going to be filling in for a while, and then we'll be getting in probably some guest co-hosts and whatnot. So the show will continue as it has. We'll still be here for you every week. And
we ain't going anywhere.
We are going nowhere. We're alpha males.
That's right. I do a billion push-ups in a bathtub of ice, and I smash my balls with a hammer to milk every last single drop of testosterone into my blood. And then I eat my jizz. Most importantly.
Someone was talking about they were in some kind of like a rally. It was like a Trump rally or something adjacent to that, like some kind of, and one of the speakers got up and was like, how many of you drink your own urine? And like 3/4 of the audience's hands went up because, you know, the whole like sort of wellness to QAnon to like conservative pipeline where people get sucked into like biohacking and wellness, which really is just
eating
eugenics light.
It's just eating your cum.
It's eugenics light.
Eugenics, no, that is true.
It really
you're not
is.
good enough. You're not good enough to exist in this system, so please optimize.
Well, that's why I say like podcasts are trend very conservative because it's either like wellness biohacking stuff, which is very much like body fascism. It's conservative commentary, or it's true crime, which again is propaganda, law and order, like worship, but for white feminism.
Well,
like,
it's all about the perception of strength and weakness.
Yeah.
And people are really scared because we're so detached from the necessary physical aspects of trying to survive in a world. In a world. So you have all these people who sit on their ass all day looking at their phone. And then before they go to bed at night.
We're people.
And
we're people.
We are one of these people. I, by the way, completely guilty here. Yeah. All these people that I'm talking about, braver, more handsome, stronger, and more more useful than me. They're on their phone all day. And then they go to bed. And then right as their eyes are about to close, they go, oh, I didn't do shit all day. I didn't do any bicep curls. I didn't do any push-ups. I didn't beat anybody up. I didn't go talk to the person that's really cute. I didn't do any of that stuff. And then they're like, oh, is that because I'm weak? Yes, it's because you're weak. And so then they're like, I'll go watch a podcast about how it cannot be weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I think that process goes.
No, like it makes you feel like you're doing something. I'm wall-to-wall political podcasts on YouTube. Since Harris entered the race is when I became super interested.
You just want to have sex with Harris. Let's be honest.
Oh my God.
You just think she's hot. That's why you're doing it. That has nothing to do with you.
Meat, scissors, sisters, bitch. Like, give me a chance. Like, I'm sorry. You can't tell me that the second gentleman is not a beard. I want to know who her real husband is.
You need to be real careful in this climate change like that.
Listen, I'm not saying he's cucked. I'm just saying that I think that there's a reason why
there's no little cucky-wucky going on?
No, but I think that there's a reason that a strong, independent woman, child-free, with lots of female friends.
Behold your America future. I mean, behold your future, America. See, that's how.
Behold your America
future. I know, the future better watch out because America's fucked up.
We're coming for you.
Do you ever think the apocalypse was going to be a little more exciting? Like kind of like living in burned out cars and like crawling the streets while robots.
Yeah, like
down.
I didn't think it would be just me watching endless like QVC on TikTok and living in like something akin to a large cubicle.
Yeah.
In like a formicary, like in an ant farm essentially, but with really great weather.
Yeah.
You know, beach views if you're willing to take a 30-minute drive. Like, you know, it's a relatively easygoing apocalypse. But I think the apocalypse happened a really long time ago, and we've been living in it for forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see that. That. Okay.
Greetings and welcome back to Ill Repute. I'm Sovereign Sire, and I'm here with my co-host, Joshy.
That was me.
In part 1, we dove into the tragic story of Ruthie Mae McCoy, whose death exposed the harsh realities of life in Chicago's ABLA housing projects and inspired the urban legend Candyman. We talked about the myth, its real life origins, and how systemic neglect allowed horrors to happen within these communities.
We covered how Ruthie Mae's
some timelines
switching back and forth, doing that CIA thing.
Well, you know, the full moon is going into retrograde in Uranus.
We covered
Uranus is in retrofit.
My anus is wrecked for sure. I mean, Uranus is in retrograde. No, Uranus is wrecked. Not my anus. I'm a real man. I wreck anuses. They don't wreck mine. Hello, anus. Welcome to my future. Sorry, this isn't funny.
Leave it in.
We covered how Ruthie Mae's call to 911 about someone breaking in through her bathroom mirror eerily mirrored the Candyman story. And it wasn't just about ghosts. It was about real, tangible fear and danger that residents had to live with every day.
In part 2, we're going to dive even deeper. We're going to explore how the systemic issues within ABLA projects, rampant drug trade, violence, and neglect, created an environment where Ruthie Mae's tragic story wasn't just a one-off incident. We're also going to look at how Ruthie Mae herself fought to survive in this environment, trying to find a way out while battling her own mental health challenges.
This is where things are going to get even darker. It's not just about one person's fear. It's about an entire community struggling against conditions that seem insurmountable. We're going to read more about what life was like in the ABLA and how, despite her best efforts, Ruthie Mae was let down by every system that was supposed to protect her.
So buckle up, because this part of the story shows just how deeply rooted the problems were and how the system failed to address them. So let us pick up where we left off. Major drug dealers have operated out of ABLA for years, says Detective Loser.
It's not loser. It's like Lucier. It's like probably a French spelling.
Probably, says Detective Loser, who worked in and around the project since 1970. Before, though, drug dealing was limited mainly to young males. Today, many women in ABLA supplement their welfare checks by selling cocaine and marijuana. Even elderly residents are dealing drugs now, Loser says, though the seniors usually only sell marijuana. In the early 70s, the typical call for police service at ABLA was for drunken disorderly disturbance involving husband and wife, he says. Now, the calls are often for drug-related shootings and stabbings, which is very serious. But can we take a moment to visualize a project full of like 70-year-old like grandmas and grandpas, like
hustling
and selling drugs and like
slanging,
and it's like you go in to get your drugs and like normally you would have to pretend to be friends with the dealer, but now it's like you're going to visit your grandparents and you have to be like, yeah, grandma, yeah, that's so cool, totally. Anyway, can I get an 8?
Yeah, there's a Reddit story about a guy who someone put him on someone who was dealing, and it was this old woman in the projects, and that this old woman, she was not hesitant to somebody up like lethally to kill someone.
Ooh.
And what would set her off was very weird. Like she loaned him a DVD.
Right.
And looking back and reading the story, I'll like show like a flash of it on the screen from Reddit if I can find it. But essentially he went over there, he was small talking with her. She would get pain meds prescribed to her. And so he was picking up Oxy or whatever. And she's like, here's a DVD. And then he took the DVD, went to buy again. She's like, do you have my DVD? He's like, oh, I haven't watched it yet. And she got really cold with him. And then he realized that she was basically doing the bipolar, like, I'm a weirdo and I'm going to read into everything stuff.
Right.
But he just kind of saw her as this harmless old lady and realizing that she was like plotting against him and had like had her kids people up, kill people, do all kinds of shit. And so the friend that had put him on disappeared and he realized that she had something to do with it. And it's like, you think people age out, but my encounters with people who are that age, when they want to get violent, they're even more aggressive because they feel like they're being, like, once again, we're getting back to this idea of weakness and perception of weakness. Yeah. The amount of old men walking around with guns, hoping that someone does some shit to them so they get to shoot somebody.
Well, like all those stories lately of, people getting shot for pulling into the wrong driveway every single time. The assailant is a white dude in his 70s that has the armory of could equip a small army. Someone wrote a book about it, but basically the lack of third spaces. This idea that one of the things that keeps people sane is having human contact, is having community. So people that go to church or people that are in recovery that go to meetings, like that, those create community that helps keep people grounded in reality.
The chief drug sellers at ABLA are a group of Black gangster disciples who call themselves the Paymasters.
So Black gangster disciples, that's all capitalized. Like that's the name of a street gang.
Like an organization.
Like a criminal organization that was operating in Chicago in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Paymasters was like a gang inside of that organization?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. They walk through the building saying, "We got what you want. We got what you need," Siegel says. And this is Susan Siegel from the previous episode.
Yeah.
They tend to wear new clothes and lots of jewelry and carry hulking radios. Oh, like boom boxes. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought they meant like shortwave radios, captures. I'm like, damn, they're organized. The benefits of their trade thus on display for ABLA youth, many of whom serve gladly as bootlickers for the gang. Grown-ups in the ABLA are terrified of the Paymasters, to the extent that most of the residents I spoke with would not discuss, even anonymously, anything about the gang's operations. A 26-year-old ABLA resident was shot to death in May, apparently for selling drugs in the Paymasters' territory.
Suffice it to say, you can get narcotics in ABLA a lot quicker than you can get light bulbs. Profound. Quote, "The drugs are out here 24 hours. 4 o'clock in the morning, you can find something," says a 28-year-old ABLA resident and Mount Sinai Center client. Call him Tony. A recovering cocaine addict, Tony used to buy at least 5 nickel bags, $5 each, of coke a day. But when his SSI check came, he'd blow almost the whole 340 on one day's high. He says he never stole from strangers to support his habit. He was too frightened of jail. But he did rip off family members incessantly, taking cash and marketable goods from their homes. Most junkies he knew, though, had already progressed to burglaries and street stick-ups. Near ABLA, he says, quote, "You can't walk down the street without somebody asking you for money or trying to rob you to support their habit," unquote.
Very, very typical of the 80s crack.
Yeah.
I just, man, cocaine's a hell of a drug, as a great man once said.
Well, now it's OxyContin and fentanyl.
Tony and other addicts would often get high in one of the numerous vacant apartments in the Abbot that have been commandeered by the pushers. Apartments are supposed to be boarded whenever they're expected to be vacant for more than a few days. But because of the shortage of supplies and because there are so many other pressing jobs, janitors don't always get around to it quickly, the janitor says. And even when an apartment does get boarded, he says, if the pushers really want to use it, they'll find a way. Quote, "They kicked the whole frame of the door in. Boarded up doesn't mean a goddamn thing. You got to put somebody, a legal tenant, in there." But that's easier said than done, the janitor acknowledges. Tenants descend on vacant, unboarded apartments like piranhas, stripping them in no time of everything of value: sinks, cabinets, doorknobs, light bulbs. Then there's not adequate time or supplies to make the place habitable again. In the building where McCoy lived, 42 of the 148 units were vacant.
It really is insane. The pushers also reside illegally in many other apartments whose leased tenants have sublet their units, though this is not allowed by the CHA. Quote, "Like if you move, you sell your apartment to one of these peoples around here and they sell dope out of it," says Viola Good, an 11th floor resident of the building McCoy lived in. Quote, "You're still on the lease, but they pay the rent on it. Housing don't know who's staying in here. They don't come check these apartments," unquote. The rise in drug addiction and desperation, along with the increase in vacant and illegally tenanted apartments, made almost inevitable this latest project discovery, that tunnels between medicine cabinets could be used to loot neighbors.
The bathroom break-ins began occurring a year to a year and a half ago, Abbott residents say. 4 to 10 apartments on every floor are vulnerable. The pairs at the end of each floor's 2 main outdoors, the other apartments don't have back-to-back medicine cabinets. If you live at the end of a hall and the adjacent apartment is vacant or housing some unsavory squatters, you're easy prey. Quote, "It's real scary. The idea that locking your door might not be enough," says Lena Elberton, a resident of McCoy's building. Her apartment is at the end of a floor and the adjacent unit is vacant and not even locked. Quote, it lacks a doorknob, it says in the article.
But even if the adjacent apartment isn't vacant, there's cause for worry. Alice Johnson, not her real name, who lives on the 5th floor of the building in which McCoy lived, was watching TV one February evening with a friend when she saw a figure dart out of her bathroom and race out the front door. Noises in the bathroom alerted her to a second intruder, a 13-year-old boy whose girth slowed him as he attempted to squirm out of the opening where Johnson's medicine cabinet had been until the first intruder removed it. Johnson's friend held the 13-year-old while Johnson called the police. The 13-year-old confessed that he and the first boy had climbed up the pipes in the chase from a vacant apartment below, and that 2 more boys had been behind him in the wall but had retreated.
For several months, Johnson tied a rope to the bathroom door at bedtime, pulled the door shut, and tied the other end to her kid's bunk bed. She would put out a pail of water for her kids to use as a nighttime toilet. Other Abbott residents positioned furniture in front of the bathroom doors before going to bed.
That just is so bleak.
Yeah, it's really sad. The buildings were designed with the pipe chases behind the medicine cabinets to provide easy access to the plumbing. If something's leaking, janitors simply have to remove the medicine cabinet and check the pipes. It's hard to fault the architects. As the janitor says, they probably weren't thinking that people were going to be totally animalistic, quote unquote. DeVera Beverly, president of the ABLA's advisory council, says the medicine cabinet break-ins only show that if people are poor enough and need something enough, they will figure a way out. It's got to be weird to be the person who's in charge of all this because you have the worst middle management job in the world. You have no resources to help the people below you, but you got to take all the shit from the people above you. I don't know. I mean, and I think a lot of it is just awareness. I think if people were really aware of how people had to live in these situations, that there would be more done about it. But everyone does what they can to there's just different approaches, I guess, to this, to how you emotionally process.
Yeah.
It's how horrible some people have to live.
Yeah. Her first 2 years in Abbott Homes, Ruthie Mae shared her 2-bedroom apartment with Vernita, who completed her jail sentence in mid-'83. Vernita's 2 young children, she had a second in June of that year, and Vernita's boyfriend, Louis Butler. Ruthie Mae and Butler didn't see eye to eye. Quote, "At first she liked me, but then she started comparing me with Vernita's father," Butler says. The way Vernita's father had deserted, Butler says, was Ruthie Mae's favorite subject. Quote, "She thought black men was all no good. All they wanted to do was flirt and run around," unquote. In '85, largely because of the tension between Butler and Ruthie Mae, Vernita, Butler, and the kids moved out.
Vernita's departure depressed Ruthie Mae, neighbors say. She especially missed seeing her grandchildren daily. She grew more ornery toward people in the project, especially the kids. She gave no quarter to those who blasted the radios in the hallway, threatening them with a stick she carried with her. They in turn threatened and ridiculed her. Police had to intervene several times when Ruthie Mae got into a scrape. By the time you got to the scene, it was hard to tell who started what, says Area 4 Detective Anthony Menina, who later would investigate McCoy's murder, but who then worked in the 12th District Patrol. Quote, "I wouldn't say she was a violent person, but she was a little argumentative," Menina says. He thinks she mainly tried to stay to herself.
She lived in constant fear of being mugged or burglarized, with good reason. Yep. She had her lock changed by the CHA at least twice, her housing records show. She seemed obsessed with locks. Several neighbors described how she sometimes toured the 11th floor hallway, turning doorknobs, lecturing tenants whose doors she found unlocked. If you heard a car alarm blaring near Abbott Homes, chances were it wasn't a real thief, but Ruthie Mae trying to lock a car door.
That's so sad.
Living alone aggravated Ruthie Mae's fears and intensified her mental problems.
Understandably.
Yeah. She began eating irregularly and her weight dropped quickly. Her behavior was becoming more bizarre. Neighbors informed Vernita when she visited ABLA. In the winter, she was seen lying in the snow near the building, spreading her arms and legs and making angels. And on hot summer days, she wore a winter coat and several pairs of pants.
On August 10th, 1986, Ruthie Mae arrived at the emergency room of Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center with Vernita's older child, 4-year-old Bobby. The child had deep cuts on his face, arms, and legs. Ruthie Mae said she had been sitting for him and he had fallen down some stairs. Apparently, Ruthie Mae was acting somewhat peculiar, and someone in the emergency room wondered if she had pushed the child down the steps. The Department of Children and Family Services was called. When Ruthie Mae caught wind of this, she went berserk, and she had to be put in leather restraints. The hospital was able to reach Vernita, who came to pick up Bobby and sign the commitment papers for Ruthie Mae. She was taken to the nearby Illinois State Psychiatric Hospital.
Oh, that's really sad. DCFS has no record of ever investigating to see if Ruthie Mae had abused her grandchild. Vernita says she saw no signs of abuse by Ruthie Mae. On her worst days, neighbors say, Ruthie Mae could be a little hard on her grandchildren, hollering at them, pulling them roughly by an arm. Most times, though, she was warm and caring toward them, they say. She was diagnosed at ISPI as a residual type schizophrenic. Residual type schizophrenia is characterized by an absence of prominent behavioral problems, but continuing evidence of some of the symptoms of schizophrenia, such as marked social isolation, distinctly peculiar behavior, talking to oneself in public, collecting garbage, vague or digressive speech, or odd beliefs, superstitiousness, belief in clairvoyance. Ruthie Mae was discharged on September 18th. with a recommendation that she get follow-up care at the Mount Sinai Psychiatric Center.
The vast majority of the clients at the nonprofit state-funded center are ABLA residents. Some are not suffering from mental illness as it is traditionally defined, clinical coordinator Siegel says, but are, quote, caught up in the deprivation and stress of life in the project.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like,
this would make anybody fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Clients can participate in group therapy sessions, GED classes, arts and crafts projects, and community meals. The center provides a social network for clients and somewhere to go outside of the project. Quote, we strive to make it a place where people can trust each other, Siegel says. There isn't much trust in ABLA, nor a reason for it. Quote, one way of surviving there is not to be too friendly, to stay to yourself. You don't want people to know your business because that can cause you trouble. And if you get to know people, you're liable to get mixed up in something negative, like drugs, unquote.
And I would say same advice goes for getting into the entertainment industry in Hollywood. Ruthie Mae came to the center of her own accord on September 23rd. The psychiatrist who interviewed her found indications of schizophrenia, but not enough to make it clear she was suffering from that illness. That's an interesting distinction. She has it, but she's not suffering from it.
Yeah.
She definitely was not beyond the pale, Siegel says. Quote, she integrated quickly. Her hygiene was good. Her communication skills were good, unquote. But she was also extremely frightened and distrustful, wary of the other clients, Siegel says. Quote, she'd say, can I trust so-and-so to get my lunch and bring me my change? And we'd tell her, hey, you can trust anybody here. They're not going to take advantage of you like they do in the projects. Even though these people are from the projects, they don't act that way here, unquote.
Ruthie Mae would get frustrated and upset by some of the business she had to attend to in order to run her life, Siegel says. Quote, she'd get a letter in the mail from some agency, and she wouldn't know what the heck it said, and she'd get into panic, think her welfare money was going to get cut off. She wasn't illiterate, but some of these letters are so complex, anyone would have trouble reading them. So she'd bring up the letters, and I'd interpret them for her and help her follow up, write a letter if necessary. This way she knew we were looking out for her, that we would take care of her, unquote. Well, and who wants to think about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't. Shown this kind of help, Ruthie Mae, quote, warmed up very quickly, Siegel says. By the beginning of this year, she was coming to the center 3 times weekly and participating in the GED classes, the crafts projects, and the group therapy sessions. Because of Ruthie Mae's age, the GED teacher, Linda Norman, was skeptical when she signed up for the classes. Ruthie Mae scored at only the 7th grade level on the placement test, but she proved to be, quote, an alert, bright student, unquote, Norman says, as well as a dependable one. She rarely missed any of the 3 weekly sessions. By April, she was up to the 9th grade level. 6 months more, Norman says, and she probably would have earned her GED certificate.
Damn.
Fucking A.
Ruthie Mae was assertive and opinionated, Norman says. Quote, a mother figure for the younger women offering them advice on parenting. If she got into a debate with someone else, she would, quote, stand her ground, Norman says. Quote, she wasn't one to turn around and run or be meek or quiet about it. Others here respected her.
Ruthie Mae, quote, would always go on the men when they flirted with the women. She told them that was no good, unquote, says Mac Hill, who leads group sessions in which clients discuss problems in relationships. She regularly advised the women to be leery of men in the projects, Hill says. Quote, there's this project mentality a lot of guys have that they have to get over. It's a hustle life. Don't respect anybody. Get what you can. If it's money, if it's clothes, if it's stealing, if I can take a woman to bed without responsibility, if you can get away with it, go, unquote. Ruthie Mae really detested this attitude, Hill says. Quote, a younger woman might say, I'm living with a guy, I give him money, and I want him to stay around. And she'd say, I've seen men like this before and they're no good. Stay away from them. You may think you love them, but let him go. She wouldn't talk about her personal relationships, but I assumed that in her past, she probably had guys who misused her, unquote. Oof. Oof.
She managed to offer these opinions without alienating others. The staff and the clients at the Mount Sinai saw little evidence of the belligerence Ruthie Mae was known for at ABLA. Quote, she was a warm and considerate and very well liked, says Siegel.
It's almost like if you give people access to mental health care and resources, they get better.
She talked about religion occasionally, which was nothing surprising to Siegel. Most of the center's clients, she says, particularly the older women, follow the TV preachers, but religion, quote, wasn't something she obsessed about, quote, at the center.
Her progress was unquestionable, Siegel says. An adjustment in her medicine helped, but Siegel thinks the main thing was the opportunity the center gave Ruthie Mae to just sit and talk with others. Quote, She had gotten really isolated in the project because she was so afraid to leave her house. The center gave her a feeling of being more connected to the people around her. She was learning to trust people here, come to them with her troubles. I'm not saying Ruthie didn't have problems, but she was doing things to conquer those problems, unquote.
Neighbors in her building noticed the changes. Deborah Lasley, the 11th floor neighbor who would later alert police and the CHA officials that Ruthie hadn't been seen, noted Ruthie Mae had gained weight and was dressing and acting more appropriately. Her contentiousness surfaced less and was less frequent. For the first time, she seemed enthusiastic about her life. Before, she mainly talked about, quote, how much she missed her daughter and her grandbabies, Lasley said. But of late, she had begun discussing her own future. Quote, she said she wanted to be a nurse. She said, when I get my GED, I'm going to get me a job, get myself together. She was getting back on track, unquote.
But what she talked about most to neighbors and to clients and staff members at the center was how dreadful she continued to find life in Abbott homes. Quote, she said, peoples are coming into my house and taking my money, says Rosie, 32, a client at the center. Quote, she was afraid to stay there by herself. She used to say, I wish somebody'd come and live with me, unquote.
If she had to be in the project, she at least wanted to be on a lower floor or in a row house. She asked CHA officials several times for a transfer, Siegel says. Siegel wrote one of the letters herself for Ruthie Mae. Because Ruthie Mae had high blood pressure and heart problems as well as her mental disability, Siegel thought such a transfer was more than reasonable. But Ruthie Mae's request was never granted. A CHA spokesperson says she is not sure why. I mean, she's doing all the work, man. She's doing everything she can.
Yeah. Ruthie Mae realized, Siegel says, that what she really needed was to get out of the project altogether. But she couldn't afford to leave. Her CHA apartment cost her just $46 a month, and on a general assistance grant of $154 a month, she couldn't pay for anything better. When she started receiving SSI in February, Siegel says, she started planning her move out of the project. Quote, what kind of person would murder someone like Ruthie, Siegel wonders. How disturbed must someone be to kill her for a little money? Somebody who probably looked like their mother or auntie, unquote. Quote, when I grew up, doing something to someone else's mother was totally taboo, Lewis Butler says. Quote, but these guys today are different breed. They knew she had mental problems. They knew she lived alone. They saw they had an advantage, and they used the advantage, unquote. Project criminals often prey on the mentally ill, Detective Lusser says, because they know that even if they get caught, their victim will make a poor witness, one whose credibility will be questioned by a judge or jury.
So not that these guys doing violent crimes against old mentally ill women aren't absolute pieces of shit, but there's something about cocaine that brings something more than meth. Not that I'm speaking from personal experience, but there's something about cocaine that I think brings out the absolute villainy in human beings.
Well, disinhibition is a main side effect of cocaine and of stimulants.
Yeah. The two defendants in the McCoy case were charged with murder, home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, and residential burglary. The home invasion charge indicates the state believes the killers knew McCoy was home when they broke in. Butler thinks the killers wanted McCoy there so she could tell them, quote, where she had the money stashed. She didn't flee when she heard the noise in the bathroom, Butler speculates, because, quote, she probably figured they're coming in the bathroom. They waiting outside the door too. So she's sitting there, don't know which way to go. So she got on the telephone. That's the only security she had, to try to use the telephone to get the police there, end quote. And I wondered, I was like, if they're coming in, why wouldn't you just run into the hallway, run to your neighbors? And I think it's so easy to armchair quarterback violent attacks.
When your adrenaline, like when the adrenaline's pumping and if you view the outside as more dangerous, like jump into this shark infested water, and seeing how things worked there, I would probably think the same thing. Like if they're coming in through the bathroom, they probably are like on the other side of the front door as well, waiting for me to potentially run out and
just shoot her in the hallway, I guess.
Yeah.
Damn, man.
The phone was one of at least 3 items stolen from McCoy's apartment. Detectives don't know whether money was also stolen, but only change was found in the apartment. Police recovered a television and a rocking chair that belonged to McCoy in the home of one of the defendant's friends. The phone has not been found. The fact the phone was taken is intriguing. Remember that the dispatcher called her number the night she was shot, and the police officers outside her door heard the phone ring. So the phone had to be stolen after police left that night. It also means Detective Lusser acknowledges that the killers might still have been on the 11th floor when police arrived, hiding out in an apartment, perhaps the adjacent one. Possibly, they were still in McCoy's.
That's so fucking crazy.
Yeah.
The criticism of the officers for not entering McCoy's apartment is an unfair second guessing, says assistant to the police superintendent Risley. Risley says they have to believe a crime is in progress or be in quote unquote fresh pursuit of a criminal. Quote, we live in a litigious society, he says, and people are much more willing to seek redress in courts when they believe the police have improperly entered their apartment.
Yeah. That's an antagonistic relationship, clearly. Says Detective Lucer, quote, 10 years ago, we would have knocked the door down, never even thought about it, but today it's entirely different. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that, unquote. When I first spoke with him, Risley put the blame on the CHA for not coming up with a key to McCoy's apartment the first night and for their security guards opposing the police officer's desire to break into the apartment the second night. Quote, we can't answer for the CHA, Risley said. A CHA spokesperson said McCoy apparently had her lock changed on her own against CHA rules and didn't give the project office a key.
I mean, I don't fucking blame her. Tenants can get their locks changed by the CHA under certain circumstances, say if they have a purse snatched and file a police report. But because it takes the CHA weeks to get around to the job, tenants often have the job done themselves rather than worry about a thief who may be walking around with the key to their apartment. Bernita McCoy believes her mother never had the lock changed herself, but that the CHA just failed to file the key or misfiled it when it last changed Ruthie Mae's back in '86. That certainly is a possibility, the janitor says. Quote, we got just 3 carpenters for 3,790 apartments, so every key cannot get labeled. Every key cannot get put in its proper place, unquote.
Jesus. I called the security firm, Guardian Security Services, to ask why the guards were adamant about police not breaking in. Operations manager Les Lamb referred me to Winston Moore, director of CHA security. Quote, well, I don't have any answers, Moore said. He told me to call Guardian.
It could be the cops were like, worst case scenario, there's a dead body in there. We have to do a bunch of paperwork and start a thing at 4 a.m. Best case scenario for the person in there, we bust in and they're not doing anything. And then the security guards are probably going, do you want to handle this? And the cops are going, I don't want to handle this. Yeah. I think they both kind of sat around doing the Spider-Man meme. I think that's what really happened. That's my speculation.
Yeah. Whether the guards opposed the idea or not, the police still had the authority to enter the apartment, I pointed out to Risley the next time we spoke. He acknowledged this, but said 2 other factors weighed against breaking in the first night as well as the second night. That some 11th floor neighbors told the responding officers the first night that they hadn't heard gunshots or seen anything suspicious, and that the 911 calls had come from a housing project from which prank calls are the rule, not the exception.
Whoever said I didn't hear anything, those I wouldn't be surprised if they were connected to the suspects.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what happened. We're like, if I tell you anything, they're going to know it's me, and then they're going to come kill me.
Yeah.
The neighbors had to hear the gunshots, Bernita McCoy says. Quote, those walls are so thin, if you drop a pan, everyone hears it. Nobody's going to get shot 4 times, and the neighbors don't hear anything. They might have been afraid to talk about it, unquote. This seems particularly plausible considering the killers may still have been on the 11th floor when the police arrived. You have to be skeptical anytime a resident says he's seen and heard nothing. Cops who've worked in the projects will tell you. Given how rampant intimidation is, police looking for witnesses here often find that no one knows nothing about nothing. Quote, if you get labeled an informant over here, you gotta move, unquote, says Perry Smith, who lived on McCoy's floor until last year when he and his family moved out of the project. Quote, I've seen people who talk to the police get gasoline poured on their apartment door and set on fire. And there's no back door, just the windows, unquote. The numerous charred front doors in the Abbott high-rises attest to this.
Jesus. Besides McCoy's apartment and the one across the hall from which the killers came, only one apartment in that wing of the floor was occupied. The elderly woman and her 2 grown daughters who lived there apparently were the ones who told police they hadn't heard any gunshots. They stuck to that story when I talked with them. They hadn't heard or seen a thing. But would they have told police if they had heard gunshots? I asked. Well, probably not. The risk of retaliation would be too great, they said.
There we go.
Yeah. The high proportion of hoax calls the police department receives from housing projects, quote, is something an officer has to consider in determining what his appropriate action is, Risley says. He bases his assertion that 911 calls from projects are more likely to be unfounded, not on a study the department has conducted, but on, quote, empirical evidence, the experience of the officers who regularly work those beats. We could drag that stuff out in a study, but it would be kind of expensive.
Doesn't he mean anecdotal? Is he getting empirical and anecdotal mixed up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's, if your IQ is too high, they won't let you be a cop, just so you know. I'm serious.
Oh, is it because you'll have more moral and ethical quandaries with the...
There was I think it was somewhere in Virginia, a guy took a test to be a state trooper, and the commander of the state troopers denied him entry into the state troopers because he had an IQ of 180 or something like that. And he said, people who are smarter will tend to be more dishonest and crooked. I mean, the dumb ones are doing a great fucking job. I
could see that, but my guess would be that people that the more educated and the smarter people are, the more they tend to be liberal, progressive, ethical.
Yep, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Jim Budelspacher, chair of the 9/11 Committee for the Association of Public Safety Communication Officers, a national organization, says he knows of no study indicating that calls from housing projects or poor neighborhoods are more likely to be unfounded. There are, on the other hand, several studies indicating that police officers are unduly distrustful of reports of crime from the poor and Black. And housing project residents have their own notions, also supported only by quote-unquote empirical evidence about how police tend to respond to their calls. Quote, "It's poor people's in here. They're not concerned with poor people," says one resident of McCoy's floor. Quote, "Maybe they don't care, or maybe they're afraid to," unquote.
Well, that's a word. Yeah. Margaret Barrage, McCoy's former next-door neighbor, says she used to call police frequently when she heard fights in the halls or sounds like someone was trying to break into an apartment. Quote, "After a while, I didn't bother no more. They wouldn't never come up. I think them police is scared of the building just as well as we were." Unquote. Says former resident Perry Smith, quote, "They'll come, find out the elevator's not working. They go back out the door. They're not walking up those stairs. It's probably because of this belief, widely subscribed to in the project, that McCoy made a point of saying the elevator was working when she called 911. Oh.
Yeah. The two men arrested by police in the McCoy murder both were residents of the ABLA. Edward Turner, 19, was arrested in his row house apartment a few days after the killing. Unemployed, Turner has no convictions but had been out on bond of a charge of unlawful use of a weapon. On June 9th, police had caught up with the other suspect they were seeking, 25-year-old John Hondras. After getting a tip, he was in the 9th floor apartment of an Abbott high-rise a block from the one McCoy lived in. Officers found him hiding under a bed. Also unemployed, Hondras had previous convictions for robbery and possession of a stolen vehicle.
Apartment 1108, the one from which the killers came, was leased, and the rent had been paid on it through May, but Lucer says its tenants were not the lessees. Addicts frequented the apartment, neighbors told me. Detectives found no drug paraphernalia in 1108, but, quote, "they had 2 days to remove any stuff," Lucer says. "They knew the police were going to come sooner or later," unquote. The residents of 1108 included relatives of Hondras. When Lucer inspected McCoy's apartment after her body was found, he noted the opening in the bathroom wall where the medicine cabinet ought to have been. Beyond the pipes, he could see the back of the medicine cabinet in 1108. When he was in that apartment interviewing its residents, he went to their bathroom and tugged on the medicine cabinet. It seemed secure.
But after repeated interviews by Lucer and his partner, Detective Menina, several residents of the building fingered Hondras and Turner, saying they had used the medicine cabinet route into McCoy's apartment. Sometime after killing McCoy, and before she was found Friday, they nailed the cabinet in 1108 back into place, the witnesses alleged. The mode of entering the apartment was new to Lucer, but after 17 years of working in ABLA, nothing surprises. Someone comes up with a new crime technique, he says, quote, "and then they spread the good news to all the others," unquote. The case against Hondras and Turner is in its pretrial stages. Neither defendant has yet entered a plea.
It would be nice to report that McCoy's death has at least prompted the CHA to resolve the medicine cabinet dilemma. Quote, "They usually wait until someone dies, then they jump," Butler says. Indeed, the agency took no steps toward remedying the problem before McCoy's death, even though several such break-ins had been reported to it. But it doesn't appear the CHA is doing much even now.
CHA Public Affairs Director Helene Colvin minimized the extent of the medicine cabinet problem when I spoke with her in July. The agency has received, quote, "only isolated reports of such break-ins. Quote, fewer than 10 and probably only 7 in the last 18 months. Only.
Only.
But even just a half dozen reports of such break-ins in 18 months indicates a serious problem, says James Maurer, commander of Area 4 detectives. At least 3 times as many break-ins have been reported have probably occurred, Maurer says, because how often crimes and housing projects go unreported. Employees at ABLA consider Maurer's estimate conservative. So 30, 40, 50.
Yeah. Colvin told me in July that the agency had begun securing medicine cabinets in apartments, quote, "where there is a potential risk." Colvin wouldn't say how the cabinets were being secured or how she defined potential risk. A month later, I spoke with numerous residents of McCoy's building and other Abbott high-rises who live in apartments at the ends of the halls. These included 6 tenants whose apartments are adjacent to vacant ones. No one had had a CHA carpenter or janitor even look at their medicine cabinets. My subsequent phone calls to Colvin seeking an explanation were not returned. Vernita McCoy is considering suing the CHA over her mother's death. While landlords in Illinois have no special obligation to safeguard tenants from criminal acts, they have been held liable for crimes that were directly related to the condition of the premises when such crimes were foreseeable.
If they're going to sue the cops for breaking in, they better be going after the housing authority for not securing their apartments.
Yeah.
Especially because it's a known issue that's been brought to their attention several times. The CHA's paucity of funds prevents it from providing better security for residents, Colvin told me in July. Quote, this agency desperately wants to provide even better security than is provided in the private market. But we were hampered by the extraordinary deferred maintenance costs that we've inherited. As we can, we will begin to address these problems step by step. We obviously cannot address a $750 million problem in 1 year. As with everything else in the beleaguered agency, the Public Affairs Department is in disarray. After receiving a highly critical performance review, Colvin recently quit as director. The janitor says the medicine cabinets could be bolted together and attached to the masonry so that they could only be removed with a power tool. But this would make it more difficult for janitors and plumbers to check the pipes, but at least it would stop the break-ins, he says. It would be fairly simple and inexpensive, so why isn't it being done? Quote, hey, come on, the janitor says, laughing. We can't even get the wood put over the openings.
Oh my God, that's so tragic. Siegel and the janitor marvel at the grip of a project, how firmly it hangs on to residents, how it squeezes the life from them. Quote, people living in them become hopeless and helpless, Siegel says. They stop dreaming. They don't even have a concept of what it would be like not to be there. Unquote. Nobody enjoys being there, but, quote, it's like the abused child. They're more comfortable. At least they know what to expect, unquote. The janitor, quote, they call this the ABLA development. It's the ABLA settlement. It's a place to keep people out of the mainstream. The system really doesn't intend for these people to go anywhere. It's put them there and keep them there, unquote.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a friend, she was a social worker in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And insanely tough job and hard to do. So people would get put in projects in Florida and the rent would be like $5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wouldn't pay their rent because it's $5 a month and they have no concept of how to manage their money because their access to like financial literacy and all this other stuff just makes it incredibly difficult. And so then they wouldn't have paid their rent for long enough that they now owed $500. And so then she would be called in to review the case to try to work out a payment plan with them to do it. And she said it was, from the outside, it looks like, what the is wrong with you, $5? But she said once she talked to these people for a few seconds, you see that with on top of the lack of like access to education and resources and all this other stuff, just the stress and danger that's going on, you can't keep the shit in the front of your mind.
Yeah.
Like if it's something that isn't bothering you right this second, it just disappears because you have so many other pressing things that you have to constantly struggle with emotionally.
Yeah.
High-rise projects are no place for the healthy, let alone the mentally ill, Siegel says. Quote, if we could just move our clients into a decent place where they weren't surrounded by crime and drugs, most of them would do okay, unquote. Had McCoy been able to leave her hellhole, Siegel believes her outlook would have been good. She pictures Ruthie Mae continuing to visit the center, completing her GED courses, perhaps getting a simple part-time job, and managing, even enjoying her life. She was headed in that direction. I need help now getting an apartment somewhere else. I gotta get out of here, Ruthie Mae told Siegel on Wednesday, April 22nd, not long before she got in the van that took her back to her high-rise home. And that is
the ballad of Ruthie Mae McCoy. It was heavy, but it's Halloween. What a time to think about social justice.
I mean, be grateful. Be fucking grateful.
But,
I mean, if you can, maybe you are in a situation where that isn't a luxury, because gratitude is a fucking luxury, let's be honest.
But also, like with an election looming, if you're a listener and you are a Democrat, please go vote. This comes out, you'll have like 5 days. A lot of places you can walk in, you can register and vote same day. You can walk into a registrar's office. All you need is your driver's license and they will hand you a ballot. You can fill it out. But, we need social welfare programs. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So this week's episode, hosted by me, Josh, and Sovereign, written by Sovereign, and was produced and will be produced by me. You're welcome.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.